Alrighty, what's going on, guys? It's Professor Kirk here, back with another video for you all. Today we're going to be going over the adaptations to resistance training. Keep in mind, these videos are just broad overviews of the major concepts and ideas that you'll need to know for the course. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to your professor or your graduate assistant. So, with that, let us get into it. So what happens when you start training, right? Or start training consistently, let's say, because that's the perspective you're going to need to consider with this chapter in particular. So after about 3 to 6 months of training, you'll see about 25 to 100% increase in strength gains. Specifically, when we say strength gains, we're talking about increase in the cross-sectional area of muscle fibers, aka known as hypertrophy. Now, with hypertrophy, this only occurs when the muscle fibers have been worked to extreme points of exhaustion, right? So if you're just doing, let's say if I'm trying to build my chest, right? And I'm only doing like 3 pull-ups a day. Not a lot of hypertrophy is going to really occur. But if I'm doing like 40, 50 pull-ups a day, and I continue to do that, and I do progressive overload, I'll begin to see those changes. And that's the whole point with hypertrophy. You break down muscle fibers so that they can be resynthesized in a larger, more durable fashion, right? Now, one thing we got to understand with this increase in muscle strength is that it doesn't really just come down to the increase in the muscle fibers. It really comes down to the increase in activation of these neural control pathways, specifically this motor unit recruitment. So this is what determines your actual strength gains. If we don't have any recruitment of more motor neurons and such, alpha motor neurons in our muscular tissue, then there are going to be no strength gains. And that's something that you really want to know. Your professor might try to trip you up on that and be like, hey, if I just break down my muscle fibers, does that give me more strength? No. What you need is a greater recruitment of these motor units in particular. Now, I guess a small little formula that I like to think about when it comes to strength gain or strength or increase in gains, or however you want to say it, is this concept of synchronization plus recruitment. So synchronization literally just means muscle fibers working as a cohesive unit to accomplish the same common goal. So whether it's a bench press or a hack squat or a push-up or a jumping jab, those muscles are working in synchronization. Now there's an imposing concept of synchronization, but you're not really going to really need to know that for this course. Now with recruitment, this is just the recruitment of more muscle fibers. So the concept is the more repetitions that you do, whether it be more bench press sets or whether it be more push-ups or more jumping jacks or what have you, the more that you do that, the more that you recruit other muscle fibers. Because we talked about in 2 chapters ago, I want to say, we were talking about how Newton's third law, how for every reaction there's a equal and opposite reaction. So for every load or every resistance that you put on that is within your optimal working capacity of your muscle fibers will rise to the challenge, and they'll recruit other muscle fibers to help move that weight and to accomplish whatever, repetition or exercise that you're trying to perform. Moving on from that, we're going to step into something called autogenic inhibition. Now, this is really important, and this is the opposite of reciprocal inhibition. And I believe in your chapter, we don't really talk too much about reciprocal inhibition, but I want to tell you both of them so you can really have a good picture of what it is. So reciprocal inhibition, let's say we have an example. Let's say someone's throwing a baseball, right? Now, when they're about to throw that baseball, they're going to activate their anterior deltoid muscle. And as a result, with this reciprocal inhibition, it is then going to inhibit the muscles that would cause us to overextend our shoulder and such, right? So I'm throwing the baseball. The signal goes from my shoulder to my spinal cord. My spinal cord is like, all right, let's not let them extend their arm too far. So we're going to allow them to utilize in full effect their anterior deltoid muscle, but we may inhibit their posterior deltoid muscle so that we don't overextend and injure the shoulder. That is what a reciprocal inhibition is. It occurs in 2 different muscles: an antagonist muscle group and an antagonist muscle group and a protagonist muscle group or agonist muscle group. With autogenic inhibition, what we have here, let's say if we're doing a back squat, right? Now, when we're about to squat, our Golgi tendon organ gets activated. So it's the tendon that's inserted into the patellar bone, or whatever you want to call it. And from when we're about to initiate that movement, the signal gets sent to our spinal cord again. And what happens is our spinal cord sends a signal back to this Golgi tendon organ, and it doesn't allow us to go past a certain movement. And specifically with this autogenic inhibition, it occurs in the same muscle. So reciprocal inhibition occurs in 2 muscles. Autogenic inhibition occurs in 1. And what this does is it protects us from, I guess, bearing too much weight that could possibly injure us in the long run. Now, granted, the more that you train, the more that you work on that specific movement, the more that you reduce this autogenic inhibition, meaning that the more weight you can bear. Now, now the step-by-step mechanism how this occurs is not important, and this is beyond the scope of this lecture. But that's the main thing that you're really going to want to know for the autogenic inhibition. Now, moving on to fiber hypertrophy. We definitely touched on that a few minutes ago. Specifically, what we're looking at with fiber hypertrophy is the recruitment of more myofibrils, actin, myosin, those contractile proteins that we talked about that are within the muscle, sarcoplasmic reticulum, the connective tissue. All those things are what really going to help with that fiber hypertrophy. That's what's happening. I just want to list it out so you all can kind of see what exactly is involved in fiber hypertrophy. Moving on into the fiber hyperplasia, however, fiber hyperplasia is the concept that new muscle fibers can grow, or not spontaneously, or new muscle fibers can grow. Let's just say that. Now, this differs from hypertrophy because hypertrophy just means an increase in the muscle fibers that you already have. From birth, you are already equipped with all the muscle fibers that you'll need. The concept of hyperplasia is that you can somehow develop new muscle fibers. But the thing is, guys, this has only really been seen in some animals, such as like tigers, and I want to say some rabbits and such. But there's not enough evidence really showing it consistently and in humans. So you won't really need to know too much about how hyperplasia occurs. Just know the fact that there has been some research that suggests that it does occur. However, that research is somewhat iffy, in my opinion. Moving on to the final aspect is inactivity. So as we talked about, I think 2 lectures ago, inactivity is just if you don't use it, you lose it. So what happens is after let's say a week of inactivity or 3 to 6 months of inactivity, you can lose all the progress that you've essentially gained over a certain amount of time, right? So that means whether it be that you've gained 20 pounds of muscle, if you're inactive for another 3 to 6 months, you can lose all that muscle very, very quickly. And we see this with people who are in hospitals. You see it with people, not who are in hospitals, you see it with people who are weightlifters and who get really sick and they end up in the hospital. They lose all their muscle very, very quickly because that concept is true, that inactivity results in them not being able to use that muscle, which results in muscle loss. Some people, you can look at this up, it's called atrophy, that's a technical term for it. Atrophy, inactivity, immobilization, they're all kind of fall in the same realm. Now within 1 week of immobilization, however, you see a 3 to 4% decrease in strength per day. So after about a week of not doing anything, your strength is going to go down pretty significantly, in my opinion. 3 to 4% is a lot, you know what I'm saying? Because after 5 days, that's like 15 to 20% loss of strength. You know what I'm saying? That's a lot of strength that's lost. And within that strength loss, you're really losing the activation of those type 1 muscle fibers. And we're not really sure why it's type 1. If I had to guess, I would say it's more so because if you're doing exercises for long bouts of time, you eventually will rely more on those type 1 muscle fibers. So as a result, those are the ones that are going to be those are the ones you're going to lose first. And this last point is this 1 repetition max, this 1 RM right here. That's just the max weight that you can lift 1 time. And if you're being inactive, you're going to lose that for sure. So that's all we have for this video, guys. If you have any questions, let me know, and I hope that was helpful.